Hello everyone, it's Parisha from The Artistic Scroll, and in today's Procreate tutorial, we're creating a cozy winter lantern scene. We learn how to craft the intricate details of the metal lantern, how to bring the candle to life with a soft, warm glow, and play with the frosty, fluffy textures of the surrounding snow. And to give the whole piece a magical touch, we'll add some dancing fireflies around the lantern, paint the gentle sunlight streaming in through the trees, and create a serene winter background to tie everything together beautifully. To follow along, you'll need your iPad, Apple Pencil, and the Procreate app. Don't forget to download the free sketch file and color palette from the Artistic Archive. They're all there ready to help you get started. So this is a longer tutorial, so feel free to take breaks as needed and complete the illustration at your own pace. You're really going to enjoy this one. So if you're ready to bring this glowing winter lantern to life, let's jump right in and start creating. Welcome guys, so this is what your canvas will look like once you download it off the Artistic Archive. And as you can see, we've got the sketch here already on layer 1, so we're just going to go ahead and rename this as, rename this as sketch. And then we can just change the blend mode by tapping N and choosing multiply. So we're going to reduce the opacity of the sketch down to just about enough that you can see it barely and it doesn't interfere with your further layers. And we're going to be selecting our winter lantern color palette that you can also download off the Artistic Archive. Set it as default and then move your color palette menu to the left. Now we're going to create a new layer by tapping this plus sign and then moving this layer under the sketch layer. So for our brush, we're going to go into the brush library and select the technical pen brush in inking. And once you've selected that, we're going to start off by painting the trees here. So as you can see, we've got trees here in different levels of the background, and we've got one log here, one horizontal log here, so we're going to start off with those first. So for that, we're going to use this maroonish brown kind of color. So let's just go ahead and paint in the outline for the tree here. Most of this area is going to be covered by snow, so you can leave the top one as it is, and in fact you can even leave the lower margin also just an approximate one, because it's going to be covered by snow on either ends anyway, so it's fine. It's going to be overlapped. Once you've created this horizontal log, we're going to create a new layer, move it under the horizontal log layer, and we'll be painting in these two pairs of trees here. So let's go ahead and paint in these. Now it doesn't matter whether you're able to get absolute straight lines or not, because honestly, trees are very rarely just absolutely straight, aren't they? So all we really need to do is just make sure that we're closing our shape here, and then we can fill these in by just dragging in the color. Let's do the same for these last two trees here. And we will be eventually, much later on in our illustration, blurring up these trees so that you get a nice blurred kind of a background, which will keep the focus on the lantern itself, while the rest of the background is blurred as it goes further on. So don't worry, we'll not be adding a lot of details to these, but we just need an approximate kind of a shape here to help us out. Alright, so next create a new layer and then move it below this layer 3, which was these two pairs of trees, and we'll be painting in these other pairs of trees right here. You can see I'm being very loose with the brush strokes. Doesn't really matter. The only thing I would advise is that at least near the base, your tree trunk should be kind of the same thickness, if not more, because we don't want the top of the tree to be thicker than the base. That just won't look right. Okay, and then we'll be painting in these on the other side of the lantern. Alright, and then we'll create one more layer below this second layer of trees that we made for the background, and this will be our third layer. So let's go ahead and paint in these real background ones. Real background, well, the ones in the furthermost. You get what I mean, don't you? Okay, we can even just extend these a little further down here if we want. I mean, it's not going to be visible, but it's just for... you'll see we'll be using a trick later on, but I think if we just move it a little bit beyond the margin of the... what do you call it? The lantern. Then it'll help later on. Alright, so we've got all of our trees ready and I think that looks great. Next, let's go ahead and paint in the snow. So to do that, we're going to create a new layer above this horizontal log layer. And then we still got our technical pen brush selected, that's great. Let's select this blue color, the second color in our first row. And I'm just going to reduce the opacity of the tree so you can see it a bit better. What I'm trying to do now, I want you to understand here that because it's a bit of a complex illustration, we're going to be painting in the front part of the snow on the first layer, and then you can see that there's still some area of the snow right here in this corner as well as out here that is behind the lantern. We don't want to paint it on this same one, on the same layer, so that's going to be painted on a separate one. All right. So let's go ahead and just paint in the edge here, and we'll be painting in the edge of this snow with another brush in a minute once we filled in this. So here I would just suggest that let's have a clear outline of the lantern edge, and what we can do here is that now that you know that this is where the snow is going to end, we're going to have the snow bumps here, piles of snow. And don't worry about if you can't get these perfect edges, really. We're just trying to get an approximate area because the edges are going to become a bit fluffier with a different brush in a minute. Okay, and once again, because we reached the other end of the lantern, let's just draw a straight line here at the edge. And then let's go ahead and paint that. So you can see we've got a whole front section of snow here. Let's go ahead and fill it all in. Okay, great. And similarly, before we proceed to the other brush, I'm going to create a new layer below this front snow layer. And then we're just going to paint in the back section here, which is behind the lantern. Essentially, you can see that the front frame of this lantern is covering the back part of the snow, so I'm not too concerned about the margins. The only concern here is to be able to get the top one and the bottom one in place. Alright, so once these are done, we can then go ahead and just apply a little fluff to this top of the snow. And to do that, we're going to use a brush in organic here, organic section, and it's called a rainforest brush. It's a really nice versatile brush to add in any kind of fluff really. So we can have a brush size of around 2%, I'd say, and then even lesser actually, 2% is too big here. 1%, and you can even trim it down a bit. And just go in little circles, little tight circles to make these fluffy ends here for the snow. Alright, and let's do that here at the other end as well. I'd even go down lesser than that if possible. Lesser than 1%, I mean. It's not possible lesser than 1%, but you know, the minimal range of 1%. Okay, so that's looking nice and fluffy already. Very good. We can do the same for our front snow section. So let's go ahead and add in this little fluff here in tight little circles. Because as you know, like snow is rarely smooth, isn't it? It has a bit of a fluffy texture to it. So yeah. Okay, just make sure that when you draw this, get texture, it doesn't go onto the lantern itself. Okay, and then let's do it from the other side as well. I'm going to erase this section. And you can see I'm varying my pressure on the brush as well at certain points, which gives us these the tiny little fluff extra bits here as well. So you can try that as well. It helps to bring about some variety. And then don't forget to just add in this little fluff here at the edges of the snow bumps on the lantern too. The reason why we're doing this in tight circles instead of just like one line like that is because it's kind of like a semi-opaque brush. So adding in a second layer as we're going with these tight circles kind of helps to solidify the appearance of the snow. So you can use this brush for any kind of fluffy thing that you want to add a texture to. So yeah, it's a very, very versatile. Of course, it's called rainforest, so you can definitely use it for what it's really meant for. That is for drawing trees or things like that. But you can definitely use it for things like snow, etc. too. Alright, so that's looking good. We've got nice fluffy edges for all of it. I think I'm gonna add a slight thing here. Okay, so once this is done, we're going to go ahead and just paint in some more snow here in the background. Now they're all going to be different colors because what we're aiming for is the sun lighting up the snow, and this area is the darkest, and because snow kind of like takes up a lot of light from and reflects the light that it's surrounded by. So we are trying to get different colors here. The lightest color is going to be in the background in a way. Right, so to do that, we are going to create snow above each layer of trees here. So let's pick this layer 3, which was these two trees here, and we're going to create a new layer above that. And for the first color, we're going to go with this purple color, the third color in our first row in the color palette. And again, let's go back to our inking technical pen brush, because it's just going to fill the color quite evenly. So I like using that brush to give us a nice fill before we go ahead and add in the fluffy texture on the top. So to do that, again, let's go back to the rainforest brush in organic, and then we're going to add in this fluffiness at the top. Now, don't be too stressed out about adding in a lot of details to this section, because like I said, most of the background is going to be blurred. So most of the details that we're going to add will end up getting lost. So we don't need to worry too much about it. Just add in what's necessary, and that's it. Alright, so that's looking great. Next, we've got the second layer of trees, so tap on that and create a new layer above it. We're going to select this lighter purple color, which is the fourth color in our first row. And for that, again, let's go back to our technical pen brush, and we can go ahead and outline the extent that we want the snow to be. Fill it in, and then let's repeat the step of adding in the fluffy edge with the rainforest brush. Lovely. And then for our last one, we are going to select our layer 5, which was the third row of trees, create a new layer above that, and then select this little bit of a darker purple color, this pinkish purple color, and then we're going to go back to our technical pen brush and then paint in the snow for the last section. Right, and then fill it in, and again we're using the rainforest brush to fluff up the edges. Most of it's just going to be blurred out, honestly. You won't even notice that we've used this brush, but just in case it isn't, it's just going to help. It's good practice anyway. Alright, so that's looking great. Next, we are going to be working on the sky, and as you mentioned, it's going to be a nice sunrise kind of a sky, and we are aiming for something like time of dawn almost, a little bit. So to do that, let's go ahead and create a new layer below these last set of trees. And we will select our technical pen brush again. Well, actually, let's go to a soft air brush. We don't really need to use the technical pen brush for this. That's not necessary. Now, to start off, we're going to use these colors here, the second row, for the back of the sky. All right. So we're using our first color here. Let's go ahead and just fill the entire sky with that for now. And Next, we're going to be using the second color, which is this lighter orange. And let's just fill it in like this. Okay, so you've got a nice softer kind of a gradient here. And then we're going to select this peach color and then fill in some more. Just like that. Okay, and then we select this pale yellow color. And then once more, we'll fill in the top part. And for this, I would say you can even bring it down almost to the center here, where you've got the top ring of this lantern. I think you can start your yellow color from there and then just curve it up so that you've got this peach color just at the edges. Really, it's not really necessary to go all the way, or actually maybe just a little sliver might help. You can do that, just a bit. All right, so you've got a little sliver, that's fine. And then lastly, we're using this yellow color, and we're going to go ahead and just apply some central yellow. Right up till here. I would join the yellow color to the peach here in the center. And then you can have your yellow extend to these trees here, almost, and maybe just up till here as well. Okay, so once you've got something like this in place, we can then go ahead and apply some Gaussian blur to this, okay? To blur all of our sky layers together. Let's go to Gaussian blur in adjustments and then see how much do we need to go ahead and blur it to. Let's say around 24-25% would do good. So something like that. And there you go. So we've created a nice beautiful sky up here. Looks lovely. Okay, so for our next step, we are going to add in the snow here on top of the log. So let's bring back our log layer's opacity. Actually, no, we will need to reduce it. I'm going to increase the opacity of my sketch so I can see that a bit better. And here's my log layer. As you can see, we're going to create a new layer above that. Okay, and we will go back to our technical pen brush, and we're using the same color as the snow, so let's just pick that. If you want to pick it in the color palette, it's the second color in the first row. And then let's just go ahead and paint in. Now again, we are going to use the rainforest brush to give us the fluff texture later on. So let's just fill in all of the whole body of the snow first, and then we're going to go ahead and apply the fluff a little later. Now here for the lower margin of the snow, again we are trying to give an impression that the snow is scattered on the log, mainly because of the whole texture of the tree itself, because it's bark, isn't it? And it's not consistent in a way, like it's not very smooth. So it is going to fall into different crevices and cracks. So yeah, so we're trying to get this impression here by just spreading it out. Oh, no, we want to go back to that color. And because you've got the candle here in the center, everything is going to be hidden anyway. So we don't have to bother about that. But there are little gaps here that I mentioned, all of these crevices and the bark inconsistencies that we can leave out. You can even leave out any more at any other edge if you want. But generally I would say that there's going to be a thick pile on the top of the log. And then as we proceed downwards, because of gravity as well, things will slip down. So it's fine. Okay, so once you've got something like this, go ahead and fill it in. And there you go, that looks lovely. I think there's just this little section here that I'll fill in. And I'm going to now increase the opacity of my log layer and then go back to my rainforest brush, and I'm going to fluff up this snow. Now this section is not going to be blurred much at all, so we just want to make sure it's nice and fluffy, enough so that it looks a bit realistic but not overly fluffy. So it's kind of like fresh snow that we're trying to imitate here. Alright, so that looks nice. I think I can add a bit more here. Great. So for our next bit, we are now going to get started with the candle. And to do that, we are creating a new layer above this now. So we've got our back snow here, as you can see, the back snow layer. We're going to create a layer above that, okay? And then we will go back to our inking technical pen brush. And for the candle, we are going to select this white color, creamish white color in the third row. And let's go ahead and paint in our candle base. You might have to pay a bit more attention to where the lines are in this illustration, the sketch basically. It's like I mentioned, it's a bit more of a complicated one, but I think a little bit of complexity just makes it look extra pretty at the end. And then fill it in. I'm just going to remove this section here. It's not really necessary because it's going to be behind the frame, so it's fine. Alright, so you've got your candle here now. The next thing we're going to do is create the wick of the candle. So we created a new layer above the base of the candle. And for the wick, we're going to select this really dark purple color. And we've still got our technical pen brush. Bring down your brush size to about 2% and just paint in one straight line, just like that. Maybe let it disappear a bit like that up into the flame. I think that looks nice. And then for the flame, we're going to create a new layer above the wick, and we will select this yellow color in the second row, the last color, and we'll just draw a simple teardrop shape. We will be altering the shape a little later on when we're working on the flame, so don't worry about that. For now, just paint something simple. Alright, so that's looking good. We've painted in our candle. Let's work on adding in the frames of the lantern. Now, as you can see, we've got a front section of the lantern, which is this front pane entirely. Then we've got one on the right side. Then we've got one here in the background, which is the left side of the lantern. And then we've got one plane, which is at the back. All right, so we're going to be painting the front section and the right section on this first layer, and then later on we'll be painting in the back section, which is the left one, and the back section. Okay, so to do this, we're going to create a new layer above the candle, and as you can see, it's naturally because it's in front of the candle itself. That's why we're going to go ahead with that. Now we're going to use our same dark purple color that we'd used for the wick, and for this section we're going to also divide our lantern into 3 sections. One is going to be this outer frame here, as you can see. I'll be painting it, it'll be a bit clearer to you. The second part that we'll be painting would be this inner pattern here, and then the third layer is going to be whatever's between these two as the base. The reason we're doing it in different layers is because we need to be able to add in our shadows and highlights in a way which is easier and more comfortable. You can definitely go ahead and paint them all in one layer, but it's just going to be a lot of hard work to maintain boundaries with your shadows and highlights then. So to ease ourselves, we're just going to go ahead and paint in our outlines for the frame first. So that's including this upper section here as well. I'm going to bring back my brush size to around 6% or so, and then we're just going to go ahead and paint in this section. As you can see, I'm not bothering much about whatever's behind the snow here on top of the lantern as well. As long as you've got a complete shape, we're okay. But whatever is actually exposed and not covered by the snow, that needs to be properly drawn in. So for the frame, this is what I meant. We are painting in this section of the lantern. You can see that the right side of the lantern has a much thinner frame edge. Well, that's because of the perspective. We won't be able to see much of it because it's at an angular distance away from us. So that's why everything is much smaller in this dimension than it is in the front. So yeah, don't be worried if it's like, oh, it's not fitting in the same thing. It's not meant to, don't worry. But you can see that I've overfilled this, so I'm just going to have to erase a bit. Maybe just revise my outline here. Okay. Right, and Now just make sure that you've got all of your outlines in place so that you can fill it in. Like, the snow is in front, so it doesn't matter, but as long as your shapes are complete, we're good to go. Go ahead and fill it in. I've clearly made a little error here, I think, somewhere. Let's see, where have I not completed my shape? Probably just around there, I think. Yeah. So that's looking nice. We've got our shape right here. That's all filled in. Great. So for our next step, we are going to paint in the metal ring and this pattern here. So to do that, I'm just going to bring back our sketch layer a bit more because it's a darker color that we're working with. Need to be able to see it a bit better, our sketch. Right, so let's create a new layer again above the flame, which means that it's going to be below this front frame layer. And then we're going to go ahead and paint in our ring. Oh, one more thing. Let's go back to our frame layer and then just paint in this little section. I mean, it's going to just disappear in some of the snow and details, so it doesn't really matter, but it's nice if we just have it here in this layer. And then let's go back to our new layer that we'd created above the flame, and then we're going to paint in the ring, make it a circle, complete the shape, and then do the same for the outer ring. And then fill it in. Here we go. And now we just need to paint in the pattern here on the front section of the lantern. Now you've got to be very careful about where you're painting it in, because obviously it's going to get a bit confusing as to which sections are overlapping with what exactly. So let's paint in this top one first, and I'll guide you through the rest of this illustration. Unless you can obviously, it's not that difficult to spot which areas are in front, but if you do have any difficulty, it's all right. You can just go ahead and see where I'm placing in these colors and continue from there. Now these are cut out areas in the glass, well, not in the glass, in the metal section of this lantern. Okay, and while we're at it, let's go ahead and do the same on the other side of the lantern too. Fill in this nice pattern. And then we'll join in these lines here at the edge. And then we've got curves here at the lower end. Right, and then we're going to paint in the straight line. Looks good. And now I'll join in this pattern with 2 straight lines for each section. Right, so you've got a pattern like this now. So we're going to go ahead and fill it in. Okay, so something is still not completed. Well, it might be. We just need to reduce the threshold. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, here we go. Little gap. Tiny little gaps. That's filled in, and that's filled in too. Fill in any other gaps that you might have. I think we are good. Just make sure that you've got nice curved continuous edges everywhere else. And that's looking good. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this side as well. So once again, it's the same pattern essentially, so I'm just going to speed up the video slightly. I think it's not this one, it's the one right here. So it's basically just going in right here between these 2 pattern curves. Okay, so yeah, I'll see you once this is done. Alright, so this is the frame drawn here as well, the pattern drawn here. So as you can see, we've got all of these details here. I'm just going to zoom in right here. If you need to pause, you can do that and have a look. Alright. So once this is done, we are then going to be painting in the base of the front section of this lantern. And to do that, let's create a new layer below this pattern layer, so which is still above the flame. And this one's quite reasonably easy in a way that we just want to be able to fill in the base here. So that means that the shape that we need to fill in is just basically right below this pattern. So I'm just trying to draw an outline which can be right behind this pattern. Let's do that here as well. And then we're just going to complete our shape. Alright, and let's fill it in. There you go. That's filled in. And this should fill in too. If it doesn't, just go ahead and color it in. So essentially, as you can see, we've got three sections here now. We've got the frame here, then we've got the base here, and then we've got our pattern in all of these. So if I just reduce the opacity of our pattern, as you can see, I was just trying to make sure that the edge of this little base that we have, this is the frame, this is the base, and that's the pattern. The edge of the base just goes inside the margins of both the frame and pattern, so that, you know, if it's overlapping, we're able to just maintain boundaries properly. So let me see, where does this come from? Oh, okay. All right, so we've got all of our front layers ready, and the last thing that we need to do is to go ahead and paint in the glass. So because it's a glass lantern as well, isn't it? We're going to create a new layer above the flame, so right behind the base. And for the glass, we are going to select this lilac color right next to our metal violet color. So it's a third color in our third row, and we want the glass panes to be in this section and in this section. So we are just creating a shape behind the frame. There we go, and fill it in. So you can see that I've got a nice shape here right behind the lantern, just like that. And we are then going to go ahead and reduce the opacity of this glass layer down to 50%. So we've got a nice shade here. It's looking very nice, and you can see that it's kind of like a glass effect here. Exactly what we want. Because we'll be adding in a lot of highlights and everything to this later on, it'll become even more transparent then. Okay, so that's that, and we will then continue adding in some more back frames and all of these details now. So let's go ahead and do that. Firstly, we are going to let's group our layers together. You can see we've got so many of these now. I'm going to group our front lantern layers together. Just going to name this as as front lantern, and then I'm going to group our candle layers together as well. Rename that as candle, and we've got our snow layers here, so that's fine. I think we can leave the rest for now. Now the back part of the lantern is going to be behind the candle, as you can see. So let's create a new group, a new layer below the candle group, and then we will go ahead and paint in the back frame first. Now the back frame is this thicker, strong section that we have, including the base. So again, we're going to go back to the dark purple color that we have for the metal, and then we're going to paint in the frame, which is this section. And then just make sure that your shape is complete and fill it in. All right. And we are also going to be painting in the back frame here. So for the back frame, it's these two lines here. It's not the thickest ones, because remember, again, we're at a perspective where the diagonal ones, which was the right one and the left one over here, not the front, the left one, are at an angle. The back and the front are facing more towards us, so they're going to be we're going to be able to see their edges a bit more, their faces a bit more than the ones at the back. Okay, and then we've got a very tiny sliver here of the edge of the face here, so let's paint in that as well for the frame. And there you go, so that's the frame ready for us. And next we're going to go ahead and paint in the glass now, because we're going in layers again. You can imagine that the glass is inset in the frame that we have just drawn here, the lighter one. So the next layer is the first layer that we can see beyond the candle is the frame, and then we've got the glass, and then we'll have this pattern coming out. Then we're going to have the base, and then we're going to have the pattern. All right, so it's like in a bit of a reverse order here. So next we're going to be painting in the glass. So we're going to create a new layer below the frame that we've just created. So layer 23 is the glass layer, and layer 22, as you can see, was the frame. And for this again, we're going to use the lilac color, the third color in our third row for the glass. And the only thing that we need to pay attention to is to go ahead and make sure that we've got complete shapes. All around here. That looks great. And once again, we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to 30% this time. So it's giving us a nice glass kind of an effect already. Great. Next, create a new layer below this glass layer. And then we're going to go back to our dark purple color for making the base now, this time. Or actually, let's make the back pattern first, and then we can fill in the base a little easier. So once again, I'm just going to reduce the size of my brush. I'm at 3% right now. That's too small. 4% would be ideal. Yes. So let's just go ahead and paint in this pattern. Okay, so we've got the back pattern done, and then the last thing that we need to do is create the base here right between the pattern and the frame. So we're going to create a new layer below the pattern layer, and then just like we did for the front row with the same color, I'm going to go ahead and fill in this space between them. There we go. Let's do that on the other side as well. And then we've got this section here as well. There you go. And that's it. So we've created our back pattern here, as you can see. That looks nice. And then the only thing that's left to do now is to paint in some of the snow here, which is on the lantern, and the twigs here, and we'll be done with the flat colors for this illustration. It's a long one, like I mentioned before, but I think the results are truly satisfying. So we're going to go ahead and group our back lantern layers together and rename this as back lantern. Okay, now the snow is on top of this front lantern section, so we're going to create a new layer on top of this. And then once again, we're using the same snow color, which was the blue color in the first row, the second color in the first row. And let's go ahead and paint in the snow. And you know the drill, we're going to fluff up the edges with the rainforest brush. And then let's just add some snow here as well, right on top. Okay, so once you've got something like this in place, let's go ahead and use our rainforest brush and paint in some fluff on top of the snow. And you can have a look now by turning off the sketch layer and seeing if any more areas need to be embellished. You can do that. If you want to make your snow a little fluffier in some sections, you can do that too. But I think that looks nice. And yeah, you've got all of your flat colors in for this section, and the only thing that's left now are these twigs. So to do that, we're going to create a new layer above the snow layer here. So right under the sketch, go back to your technical pen brush and inking, and once again for the twigs we're using the same brown maroonish color that we've used for all of the others. So just go ahead and paint in these twigs. Alright, so we are now done with all of our flat colors, as you can see, and the next thing that we're going to be working on would be the candle itself. So let's get started with the flame then. We will go back to our candle group, and then we're going to just turn on alpha lock for our flame layer, and then let's go back to our soft air brush, and for the flame itself we will use, let's say we can use the orange color, the first color in the fourth row, and then we're just going to paint in the orange color for, like, let's say half of the flame. And then we can use this metal violet color that we had just for the base, so you get somewhat of a gradient here. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur. So I'd say a blur of just about 3 to 4% should be good. I'd say, for me, 5%. 5% seems to be fine. Next, we're going to just turn off our alpha lock, and I'm also going to reduce the opacity of our sketch layer. And while we're still on our flame layer, let's go ahead and apply a slight Gaussian blur just to blur out the edges slightly. So I'd say just about a 1%. Don't go into the 2%. Just 1% where it's nearly edging into 2. And as your smudge tool, make sure you've got the soft airbrush selected. We're going to go ahead and just smudge out the tip so that you've got a nice curved kind of an end here for the flame. like that. I think that looks nice. Next, we're going to go ahead and just change the blend mode of this layer to add. Alright, so our next step would be to add in a bit more of a glow around the flame itself. So whatever glow this flame is causing, we're going to create that. So tap on plus to create a new layer. And on this new layer, we're going to still use a soft airbrush, use this orange color. So whenever I say orange now, it's basically just this fourth row first color. And none of these oranges here in the second row. So use that, and then I'm just going to increase our brush size to somewhere around, I'd say 50-55% or so. We're going to paint in this orange glow very lightly, okay? Don't go and just apply a direct pressure and build in the color. Just a soft glow in the same area as the candle's width. Don't go too beyond the margin as well. We don't really need to apply that much glow in there. But just about this much. If you've got something like that. We are then going to go ahead and duplicate this glow color twice. So you've got 3 of these layers now. Okay, so the first layer that we've got here on top, we're going to change the blend mode of this layer to about, I think, color dodge. And then we're going to just reduce the opacity of this layer down to 40%. The second layer, we're going to change the blend mode to add. Now you can see we've got a nice gradient here as well. So that's that. And then this last row that we have, this last layer, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to apply, let's say about 20% Gaussian blur to that. And then for our add layer, let's apply a Gaussian blur to that as well. So I'd say somewhere around 13 to 14%. And let's do the same for the color dodge layer as well. And to apply Gaussian blur, the same 13 to 14%. And there you go, you've got a nice glow here for your candle, and that looks lovely. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be working on the base of the candle itself, the wax. And for that, let's create a clipping mask to our candle base. And we're going to change the blend mode of this to linear burn. We've still got our soft airbrush selected. And for the shadow for this, because we're trying to create a nice 3D kind of a structure here, we're going to use this pinkish purple color that we used for our snow. So let's use that, and I'm going to reduce the brush size to around 25%. And firstly, let's just paint in a bit of shadow at the edges, and then continue it down here as well. And then I'm also going to reduce my brush size and paint in a bit more of a shadow right here at the base. You see there's a bit of a dip in the candle at the top, so we're going to paint in that. And once that's done, let's go ahead and just use the smudge tool and blend this at the edges. You can also use the Gaussian blur at this point, but I prefer using the smudge tool as it gives you a bit more control on your shadows. Okay, and then once these are done, we're just going to go ahead and place in a light shadow here in the center as well. Okay, and then at this point you can definitely go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur. So I'd say somewhere around a 7%. So you've got a bit more uniformity, and that looks nice. Okay, for our next step, we're going to create another clipping mask. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to linear burn as well. Let's select the yellow color, the flame color, and then we're going to paint in just the edge shadows with this. Enhance the shadows a little bit more. And this time we're also painting in the upper round shadow here, this curved edge. And then we're going to reduce the size of the opacity of this layer down to about 50%. And let's have a look by turning off our sketch layer whether we need to go ahead and blend some more or add in any more shadows. I think we can just add in a bit more. And then we can blend it as well. Okay, and once you're done with that, we are just going to add in a little bit of texture to our candle. And for that, we're going to create a new clipping mask and move this clipping mask right above the base. So it's below these linear burn layers. And we're going to change the blend mode of this texture layer to multiply. And for our texture, we're going to use a brush in the drawing section, and it's called Gloaming. It's just a nice brush. Make sure that the size is maximum. You still got the same yellow color. Just try and paint it all in one layer because it's kind of a buildable kind of a brush. So if you paint it on top of like one layer on top of the other, it's just going to have more darkening in that way. So we don't really need that. If you feel like it's too light, you can go ahead and do that a bit more, but I don't think it's really necessary. You can then bring down the opacity of this layer down to about 25%, and there you go. So you've got a nice texture to your candle, enough shadows and everything, and I think that looks nice. I'm just going to go ahead and blend in these edge shadows a bit more because I think they're a bit too conspicuous. I'd really like them to have a bit more form here. Okay, so that's looking nice. Okay, so the candle is done at this section. I think that's looking great. We're also going to go ahead and apply a little bit more. We need some reflections basically because it's glass, isn't it? And if you're looking at this angle from the front, you can see through that, but then this interior is going to be reflected onto the left, right, and the back sections of the glass as well. So we're going to try and create that effect as well. So to do that, let's go ahead and duplicate our sections here. Now, we don't need to duplicate the glow, so we are just going to select these layers, the flame, and as you can see, the rest of the candle. We're going to group that within it, within the candle group, and we're going to duplicate that group, okay? So once you duplicated it, we're going to flatten this group. So you've got an entire nice candle layer here as well. And we're going to do this twice. So we've duplicated the entire candle layer once more. So you've got two of these flattened candle layers. Now we're going to just move these to one section here and then another section to the back. Okay, so for the first one, you're going to make sure that that is selected. And then tap on this transform tool so that the entire candle gets selected. And then we're just going to move this down here. As you can see, the entire candle has been moved. Now, the only thing is, as you can see, we have to kind of align it because it's a bit too thick. It doesn't really seem normal here. So to do that, we're going to select distort and try and just fit it in such a way that the base of this candle is kind of parallel to the lower base of the lantern, the metal base, and then try and fix these two ends as well within these two curves over here, as you can see. Okay, by the curves I mean these patterns, something like that. And then we're going to do the same on the top here as well, so that they're nearly the same width, isn't it? Because it needs to be the same kind of width throughout. So I'm going to try and do that. And once you're happy, it doesn't have to be absolute accurate, to be honest, as long as there is enough of similarity, we're happy with it. And you can even place this a little higher up. Here. I think that looks nice. I know it's looking a little odd right now, don't worry. We will be changing in the blend modes and everything to make it look a bit more realistic. So let's just align the second one as well. So we'll choose the second duplicated layer there and then select the transform tool. And then we're going to move this to the back. Now the back one is almost on the similar level. So all we're really going to do is, I want this to be a bit towards this side here. Then we're just going to click on uniform and I'm going to reduce the size slightly. Or let's just keep the original size. Let's keep the original size and I'm going to distort it now from the top. So really, you can just play along and see whatever looks good to you. You can definitely have it that way. There is no fixed rule here. We're not in a physics class. We're just trying to have some fun with these reflections. Okay, so I think that looks nice. Okay, so once you've got something like that, we are then just going to move both of these reflections below our candle group, because naturally the candle has to be there on top, isn't it? We're going to change the blend modes of both of these reflections to overlay now. As you can see now, it's looking like, oh, okay, it's been reflected on there. So that's one, and the other one as well, to overlay, and that looks great. Now we've got all of these edges here quite strong till the base. We can go ahead and just erase some of these now. So use your soft airbrush as an eraser, increase the size to somewhere around 50-55%, and then very gently go ahead and, oh, I'm on the wrong layer, go ahead and just erase this from the base until you've got something like, let's say, half of the candle there. And then you can just lightly use the smudge tool, the soft airbrush as the smudge tool, to smudge some of the color down here as well. You'll see it better in the second one. So we're going to use the soft brush as an eraser. As you can see, I'm erasing this base till half of the candle, and then I'm just using the soft airbrush as a smudge tool to gently smudge in some of this color Okay, so that looks more like a proper reflection and much nicer. Okay, now, but you can also see that our candle flames have just reduced in size too a little bit. We want them to be a little bit plumper in a way. So let's go ahead and duplicate our candle flame layers. Okay, and we can do that until we receive, I think, about 4. Because at the end of the day, there's like the original candle, which is here in the center. Then we've got one for the left, one for the back, and one for the right section. Because we haven't really created an entire candle here for the right panel. We're just creating the flame for that. You can go ahead and do that for the right side as well, but I really wouldn't go that far. It's not necessary. So right now, let's go ahead and move these below here out of the group. We've got 3 out of the group now. So leave the 4th one, obviously, which was in the center. So we're going to leave that. I'm going to just turn that off. One more thing that we can also do is reduce the opacity of our overlay layer to about 70% on both sides so that it looks even more realistic. And then we are also, like I mentioned, for our flames, let's go ahead and place these in now. So firstly, we'll just move one here in the center, and then we can try and just align it to this the flame that is already present there. We can reduce the size of our flame here and then just try and adjust it accordingly. Yeah, I think that looks nicer. And then we can do the same for the others as well. Now you can see that this one is right here. It's quite in the corner as well, so we don't really need to do much adjustments for that. I'm going to leave that. If yours needs adjustment, feel free to do it. The 3rd one, I'm just going to move it to perhaps this section here of the candle flame, of the glass panel. It's somewhere up here. Alright, so we've got these up here. We're then going to go ahead and just reduce the opacities of our layers here of these flames down to about 40% for all of them. Right, and while we're at it, we can also go ahead and give these a little bit more body by just going ahead and duplicating each of these and changing the blend mode of the lower ones to normal. So you can see we've got one group here of a normal one and an add, as you can see, isn't it? So you've got one normal and we've got one add. So that kind of enhances the effect a bit. Similarly, let's do this for the back one as well. So we've got one add and we've got one normal. And then we're going to do the same for the one on the left section. So duplicate it once more. So we've got one add and we've got one normal. So I think it looks way better if we have this normal layer behind it and gives it a nice kind of a diffuse and bright look as well. Okay. So those are our candle reflections and I think they look great. We can go ahead and just blur these out a little bit more if you want. So I'm just going to apply a slight Gaussian blur to the add layer, just about 2%, to both of them. Okay, so we've got all the reflections here and that looks great, I think. So if you want to make any changes, like if you want to erase some areas from this candle, you can go ahead and do that. I think I might just erase a little bit more of this candle, but that's it. Okay, so our reflections are done. And the next thing that we're going to be working on would be to add in a little bit more glow inside this entire, let's say, yeah, the lantern, entire lantern. So to do that, let's go ahead and I think one thing we can do is just group our flame layers together as well, all of our reflections, and we're going to rename this group as reflections. And then right above this back lantern group, create a new layer. This is right under the reflections, as you can see. We're going to be painting in an orange glow inside the lantern. So select your soft airbrush and we're going to go back to our orange color, and then just inside our lantern here we can go ahead and paint in some orange color. And you can do this around the top half of the lantern. Okay, and just make sure that you've not gone beyond the borders of the lantern itself, because this glow is meant to be inside the lantern and not outside. So if you have, go ahead and just erase any glow that's gone beyond it. I think I might just have to do some additions there, but I'll do that later. Okay, so once you've got something like this in place, we are then going to go ahead and reduce the opacity of this one to about 20%. Okay, now let's duplicate this orange glow layer, and we're going to change the blend mode of the top layer to add. And it's still at an opacity of 20%, and we've got a nice soft glow inside the lantern. As you can see, it's looking very nice already. Okay, so all of these changes are going to look much more prominent once we have worked on the glass a little bit more, so we'll be doing that a bit later on. Okay, so let's begin by working on the frame now. And we can go ahead and turn our sketch layer back on. We'll need it. Okay, now the front lantern is where we've got all of our layers here. So we're going to start off with this one, the layer 16, which is the main frame outside here. So let's create a clipping mask to that. Then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. And then we're going to go back to the technical pen brush and select the same color as the metal. And then we're just going to, because this section is going to be up in shadows anyway, let's just paint it all here as a dark one. And then we can reduce the opacity of this layer down to around 40%. And also, because this section, the front section of the lantern is more visible to us, the one on the right side is a bit more in a distance and at an angle, so we want that to be more of in a shadow. So let's go ahead and just paint in a general shadow for that section as well. So here we go. and then just fill it all in. You can see that this section's darker now. We're going to repeat the same step for the base as well a little later, but I just want to have this diagonal section, the sloping section, as well as this sloping section a little bit darker. So we're going to create another clipping mask below this one, the one we just created. We're going to change the blend mode to multiply again and reduce the opacity of this layer down to 30% this time. And we are just placing in the shadow for here, for the sloping parts only. So go ahead and fill that in. And then we're going to repeat the same thing here for this other end. Here we go. So you've got a bit more of a variation that you can see a bit better without the sketch now. We're able to determine the ends here a bit better. So that's great. So let's turn our sketch layer back on. And next we're going to be working on adding in some highlights now to this. So let's create a clipping mask on top for the frame. And then you're going to change the blend mode this time for the highlights to screen. And we've still got the same metal color selected, but we're going to now apply some highlights. So as you can see, the highlight on the right side of this lantern is going to be very slim, so don't worry about it if it's not really falling into place, that's fine. But just here at the edge as well, we will need a highlight to be able to distinguish between the frame and the base, as you can see. This is the entire reason why we've painted our base and the frame and everything on different layers. To be able to just apply Gaussian blur straight away to this and simplify our illustration steps. And then don't forget to add in a highlight at the base as well. And here at the other end too. Okay, now we can just turn off our sketch layer and have a look. We've definitely got a lot more alignment now, haven't we? And we can also have a look and see if we need any more highlights anywhere else. Don't think so. I think this should be sufficient. We can now go ahead and just reduce the opacity of this screen layer down to around 35% because we don't want it to be too bright and take away from the illustration as such. We're going to apply a soft Gaussian blur to this, so I'd say just about a 2%. That should be enough. Yeah, so we've got a lovely, nice highlight here, and that looks good. But this is just the metal highlight that we have. We're going to enhance this a bit more by creating another clipping mask, change the blend mode to screen, and then we're going to use this orange color And then we're going to paint in just some orange glow on the insides only. So you can imagine that that glow is coming from the candle here. So it's going to be painted at the inner edge, just like here. And then remember to do this at the other end too. And if at any point you feel like you need some help, turn on your sketch layer so you can see it a bit better. Here we go. And you can turn off your sketch layer. You've got these highlights, the glows over here, so that's looking great. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer now down to about 50%, and then we can apply a Gaussian blur again to this. So I'd say somewhere between 2 to 3%. Yeah, I think just touching 3%, and that looks nice. So we've got a soft glow all around the front frame here, and that looks nice. Okay, so we're done with the front frame. We can go ahead and group our front frame layers and just rename this as front frame. That should be fine. Next, we're going to be working on the pattern here as well as the ring. And I've just noticed it would be nice if I had a bit more snow here. So before I move on, I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit more snow with this rainforest brush. So I feel like it's looking a little bit too empty. Yeah, I think that suits it much better. And now we can go back to the pattern layer here. I'm going to turn back our sketch layer on, and we are going to now create a clipping mask here. And then we're going to be painting in some shadows and highlights, just the same way that we've done for our main layer, for the frame layer, I mean. So let's start off by adding in some highlights first to this, so that we know exactly where the highlight is going to be, and then on the opposite side we're going to have some shadows. So we are going to create a new clipping mask to our pattern layer, and then we're going to just change the blend mode to add. Okay, so then we are going to just start creating some highlights here with the orange color. And we're going to go back to our technical pen brush and start painting these in. So you can imagine that if the light is coming out from the candle here, it's going to hit probably the lower surfaces of the frame here, of this entire pattern. Some sides of these, and the other side's not going to get that much light maybe. So let's go ahead and try and get that effect into place. I can see that some of this color hasn't filled in, so give me 1 second. I'm just going to fill this right in here. Okay. Okay, so maybe just have it going down into the other one as well. So I'm just extending the line here, the highlight, into the pattern, as you can see. And then also for this one, we can have some highlights around this side. It's on the lower side of all of these, as you can see. Yeah, so let's repeat the same thing on the other side too. And if you notice that the color hasn't filled in for your frames, just like in mine, you can go ahead and add in those colors too. Okay, and then let's just do the lower edge as well. So you can imagine that the light's going to hit the top surface here, and then for these curves it's going to hit this lower edge. Alright, so once you've got these highlights in, it's time to add in some highlights to these lines here as well. So we can imagine that the inner edge of this pattern is going to be lit up, and continue down here with a break here because there's a curve. And then for the curve itself, probably going to hit maybe this section. Similarly, it's going to have the light's going to hit in this section too. Okay. And then similarly, we're going to have the light hitting this edge. I think I'm going to increase my brush size. Just make sure that you have the same thickness of highlight here, that'll help. And then also repeat the same thing here at this edge. And I'm just going to slightly erase the ends. And then again continue on this end. And the same on this side. and up here. Okay, so we've got highlights on all of these edges. That's great. And let's do the same on this side as well, except that you can imagine that now the highlights are going to be reversed. So if it was on the right side of the blue frame, now it's going to be on the left side because we're on an angle at this time. A little bit complicated maybe, but definitely not too difficult to imagine. Alright, so we've got all of our highlights in place now, and I think that looks great. I'm going to turn off our sketch layer so we can have a better look, see if anything else needs to be placed. Nope, we are good. So now we're going to just go ahead and apply some Gaussian blur to this. Again, I'd say just about a 2%. Or let's not apply a Gaussian blur for now. Let's have another look and see. Maybe what we can also do is let's duplicate this layer now and see where we can probably add in some more definition to this. So we've got 2 duplicated layers now, okay? And we're going to reduce the opacity of the top one down to about 50%. Okay? And then we've got the lower one here. We can reduce the opacity of it down to around 80%. And we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to the lower one instead. Okay, and then let's see. This is giving us a much clearer effect, isn't it? Without diluting the actual highlight that we want. That was happening in the first step, which is not what we wanted. So I think this would look much better. So if you have I think a blurring of about 2 to 3%, that would look good. Yeah, just touching 3% for me, and I think that looks nice. Let's see again. Yeah, okay. So that's looking great. Next thing we need to add in are some shadows on the other side of all of these highlights. So that's going to bring out the effect even more. So let's go ahead and do that. We're creating a new clipping mask below these highlight layers. And then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to multiply. And we're going to turn back our sketch layer, turn it on again. Select the same metal blue color as before. And this time we're going to be adding in all of our shadows on the opposite side of the pattern. can reduce the opacity of the sketch layer so I can see where I'm placing my shadows a little bit more clearly. We'll have to do some editing for our highlights here. As you can see that there's some overlapping there. We'll take care of that in a minute. Okay, so you can see it's already giving a much more prominent effect, isn't it? Adding these shadows. So let's do that on all of these other ends, and I'm going to speed up the video a bit and I will see you once these are all done. Okay, so I've added in all of my details here as well, and just like we did for our highlights, we're going to duplicate this as well, this layer, and then we're going to reduce the opacity of the top layer down to about 30%, and we're going to simply apply a Gaussian blur to the lower one instead of reducing opacities. So once again, that would be, I think it would be better if I just turn off my sketch to see it a bit better. Yeah. So again, I think for me, just about a 2% would be enough. So you've got clear distinctions, as you can see, and none of this would have been possible if we hadn't made these on separate layers. Okay, so I'm just going back to our highlights layer now and just making these soft changes. Perhaps I'm just going to erase this. Here, and you can then go ahead and just blend in some of these as well along the edges to give it a softer and nicer look. Not too much, don't need to go overboard, just enough that we can add some more. I think we can even add a little bit of glow over here too on this side. Must have missed that. So I'm just using the soft airbrush as the smudge tool in this. Just smudge it all into place. Just the edges of these tapers. Yeah, and that's it. So that's looking great. And we are done with the pattern section as well. So let's go ahead and group pattern layers together and then rename this as pattern. And then we've got the, oh, we're not done yet. Sorry, I forgot that the ring is here in this one as well. All right, so the ring will be a pretty quick one. So for the ring, we're just going to be using the same metal color as for the highlights, and you can use a soft airbrush. So again, just for the highlights, all you really need to do is just give it a nice edge highlight here, and then you can go ahead and blend it again. And then let's go ahead and just add in a shadow at the opposite end. Especially under the snow here as well. And in this section where we've got the buckle, in a way. Would it be called a buckle? I don't know. This little curve here where the ring is threaded through. Okay, so that's it. We don't really need to add in more to that. I think we're fine. All right, so the pattern is done. And the next thing that we're going to be working on would be the base layer. So let's go ahead and work on that. We're going to duplicate our base layer firstly, okay? And then to make things easier for us in a way, we just want it to be a little bit darker than the frame itself. So we're doing that. The top layer, okay? So we're going to be changing this one to a clipping mask. And then we're going to change the blend mode of that one to multiply. And you can see suddenly it's gone darker, but it's grown so dark that even the pattern layer is melding in with it. So we don't want that. We're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to about 30%. And I think that's looking good. You don't really need to add in more to that, to be honest. I think it's looking great that way. The only thing we need to do is to just add in a bit more of a shadow on the right side, just the same way that we'd added an extra shadow over here for the frame. So we want a shadow on this one too. To do that, we're going to create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply again, reduce the opacity down to 30%, which was the same that we'd done for the frame. And we are going to use our technical pen brush and just create a shape around here and fill it in so that the base on this side is colored in as well and it's darker. All right, so once that's done, we are then just going to apply some shadows for our pattern layer, shadows caused by the pattern layer onto the base, and that's it. We don't really need highlights for this one. So we are just going to create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to multiply. And then let's go ahead and just paint in some textures, some shadows over here. So just the outer edge of the pattern. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to apply a Gaussian blur to this. Say just about a 2 or a 3%. And then reduce the opacity of this down to 60%. And we are done with the front frame, and that looks great. Let's just group our section here, and then we're going to name this as, what should we call it? Front base? Yeah, okay. Now we're on to the glass section here. So for this, as soon as we're going to create a clipping mask to our glass layer, you can see that suddenly our glass layer has become a bit more transparent. And that's the kind of effect that we wanted to achieve anyway. All right, so we've got this, and then we're just going to apply a bit more of a texture onto our glass first. So to do that, let's change the blend mode to overlay. And we are going to go to charcoals, and we're going to select the willow charcoal brush for our glass texture. And for that, we're going to use this same lilac color as the glass paint. And then let's just increase our brush size to around 20%. Lightly paint in a glass texture. And that's that. It's barely going to be visible. It's there, trust me. Okay, so once that's been painted in, we are then going to go ahead and duplicate this layer now. Okay, so we've duplicated it, and then we're going to change the upper layer blend mode to multiply, and we're going to reduce the opacity down to 30%. So you've got a bit more color to our glass now, and it's looking like it's glowing a bit more. So that's exactly the kind of effect that we wanted. And then if you've ever noticed, in some windows when they cloud over at the edges, or even in old glass or something like that, in lanterns or window panes or anything like that, at the edges there's a slight cloudiness sometimes because of condensation, or just because of the difference between the heat coming from inside and the cold outside. So we're going to try and imitate that effect here as well for our glass. And to do that, let's create a new layer, new clipping mask on this, change the blend mode to add, and then we're going to select in charcoals again, the 2B compressed brush. I've reduced my brush size to just about 1%, okay? And we are still using the same lilac color, and we're going to lightly start painting in some slight condensation, kind of ghosting effect at the edges, just like that. And as you can see, we're getting a bit more of this nice cloudy, hazy kind of an effect. So you can go ahead and apply this effect on all of your edges here for the window, for the glass pane, I mean. Not window, it's a glass pane. Near the frame basically, and the pattern. So as you can see, we've got a nice ghosting kind of an effect here at the edges, and I'm just lightly applying a little bit more variation just around the edges where they're meeting at the points, I mean, here. Yeah. So I think that's looking nice. Okay, so we are done with the front section of this lantern and that looks nice. Let's group our glass layers here. Rename this as glass. And that looks great. Okay, so let's work on the back part of the lantern. We are going to just turn on a sketch layer. And just the way that we worked for the base of the front lantern, we're going to duplicate our back lantern base layer here. So you can see that this is the base layer. We just want it to have a bit of a darker color, add a bit more texture to it, and work on from there. So let's duplicate our base layer here for the back lantern, and then we're going to change that into a clipping mask, and then we are then going to just change the blend mode to multiply. Okay, and we're going to reduce the opacity down to around 70%. Let's create another clipping mask now on top of this. And now we are going to just paint, keep it normal as the blend mode, and then we're going to paint a texture on top of this. So for the texture, we're going to go to painting and select the stucco brush. So we've still got our purple color, the same metal color that we had, and we're going to just paint in this texture, which you can see it's kind of rough in appearance, exactly what we want. I've got a brush size of around 7%, so you can just lightly paint in this texture on it. And once you're done with that, we are then going to just create another clipping mask on top of this, and then we're going to just basically paint another base shadow on top. So change the blend mode to multiply, and then we're going to select the soft airbrush with the same color, the same blue color. We are then going to just paint in a soft shadow on top, and then reduce the opacity down to around 50%. Okay, so we've still got a little bit of a texture on the base. This is exactly what we want, but we didn't want to go ahead and add in a lot of color variations in it. So just that. Now we're going to paint in some edge shadows. So create another clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then we will paint in some shadows right here at the edge. And one here. So the top part of the frame is distinguished from the one that is here, the square bit here. And then also just paint in a bit of a shadow around the candle base. So just something like that. And then we can go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur. Very slight one, say just about 2 to 3%. And once that's done, we can go ahead and apply some highlights to this area now. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and then we're going to select the orange color again. And for this, we can go ahead and apply an edge highlight at the top part of the frame. Okay, and then also we're going to add in some edge highlights here. At the base of the square. Alright, and then we're just going to apply a Gaussian blur to all of this. So I'd say it can even go up to about... Actually, let's just reduce the opacity of this a bit first and see how much we really need to go ahead with. So we can reduce the opacity to about 70% and then apply a Gaussian blur and see. So I think we can go up to about 12 to 13% of a Gaussian blur. That lights it up quite nicely, and then we can just repeat the step of having this edge highlight at the top. You can just lightly blend that in with the soft airbrush. And you can see, because we've added in some edge shadows already, we don't really need to go ahead and add in anything more. So if you turn off the sketch layer, you're still able to see where this area ends and where it doesn't, in a way. So to enhance that even further, maybe we can just lightly erase the highlight from the vertical part of this edge. So I've got the soft airbrush selected, and I'm just going to lightly erase this section. There we go. Alright, so that's looking nice, and that's all that we really need to do for that part. We can also, in the meantime, just add in a little bit more of a highlight to the frame up here. And then just blend in the edges. And you can even just place in a central highlight right where we're expecting the corner to be, which is right in this section. So we can place in a highlight there, turn off your sketch layer, and then gently blend it in. Okay, so you've got your highlights there. Looks nice. Right, I think I might have a bit of a gap here for my pattern, so I'm just going to go back and fill that in before we move on. Alright, so that's that. You don't need to add in any more steps for the base of our lantern, so we can go ahead and group all of those, and then we can name this as frame for the back lantern. We already know that. Okay, so we don't really need to work on the glass much in this section, so we're going to leave it as it is, but we are now on the pattern layer. Okay, we're going to create a clipping mask for this one, and then we're going to paint in some shadows to that, just like we painted shadows for our front one. So let's select our technical pen brush and the same metal violet color. We're going to need a sketch layer for this. I'm going to be painting in some shadows, so let's go ahead and do that. So for the shadows for this one, we will be placing them towards the left side of all of our patterns here. So let's go ahead and paint those in with the technical pen brush. And then for these, on the back part of the lantern, the shadows are going to be on the right side. Alright, so we've got all of our shadows in place. I'm going to turn off my sketch layer now, and then we're just going to go ahead and use the same method that we had used before. We're going to duplicate our shadow layer, and then we're going to reduce the opacity of the upper layer down to about 30%, and we'll apply a little Gaussian blur to the lower layer. Again, we don't really need much, just about 1 to 2%, and that's that. And then similarly, we're just going to add in highlights to the other side. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode to add, and we're using our orange color for our highlights, and let's go ahead and just create them now. Alright, so we've got all of our highlights in place now, and we can go ahead and just do the same thing again before we go ahead and blur anything. Duplicate this highlight layer and change the opacity of the top one to 30% and the lower one down to 80%. And then we're also going to apply Gaussian blur to the lower one. So once again, just about 2 or 3%, and that should suffice. I think I'm just going to blend in some of these at the edges. Okay, so that's all done. That's looking great. We can go ahead and group our pattern layer and then rename this group as pattern, and that looks great. So the last thing that we have to do here is to work on the lantern base layer as well, the one in between. So we're going to just add in a little bit of a glow to these. We don't really have to do much more than that. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create a new clipping mask to the pattern base layer, which was this one, so you can see right here. And then we are just going to change the blend mode to color dodge. We've still got our orange color selected. I'm gonna go and select my soft airbrush and can increase the brush size a bit. And all we need to do is just paint a bit of an orangish glow here in this section, so you can see just on the top half of it. And once that's done, almost 2/3, not half, almost 2/3 of it. Once that's done, we can go ahead and duplicate this layer and then change the blend mode of this duplicated layer to overlay. And we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to about 50%, so we get a nice gradient glow over here, exactly what we want. You can go ahead and blend them as well a little bit. Right, so that's looking great. We've got all of our details done for this. So as you can see, I think we're almost done with our lantern. The only thing that I would like to do here is I want a bit more of a glow for my candle here. I want it a bit more vibrant in a way. So let me just quickly group our base layer here, base layers here, and then just rename that as base. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my candle group here. And you see these three colors that we have here. They're this orange color. I just want it to be a bit more vibrant in a way. So I am just selecting the first one, any of them. Then I'm going to go to adjustments and select the hue, saturation, brightness. And in the saturation one, I think I'm just going to increase the saturation to just about 60%. And I'm going to repeat the same for all of the other two as well. So increase the saturation, make it a bit more vibrant. Okay, not Gaussian blur. Saturation. Down to 60%. And I think that looks much more vibrant, doesn't it? Definitely. I think it looks nicer. Okay, so one more thing that I can do is I can go ahead and just duplicate this flame layer here, the central flame layer, and that's already looking nice. So I'm going to slightly reduce the opacity of this one, maybe bring it down to about 70%, just so that we have a bit more of a clearer outline here. And we can also just apply some soft Gaussian blur, not Gaussian blur, sorry, blend it up a bit. We're not using Gaussian blur in this, just so that we can give this a little bit more of a wispy kind of a look, the duplicated one. Okay, so I think that looks nice. We can also do the same thing for the other layers here as well, because I feel like the reflections, I feel like they're a bit too stiff, so maybe I would just go ahead and do that. Am I on the right one though? Probably not. Here we go. So what we really need to do is, I think it's the overlay layer that really needs to be a bit, yeah, here we go. So it's the overlay layer that just needs a little bit more blending at the flame. To make it look a bit more settled. And that looks softer and much nicer as a reflection. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other one here at the back. The overlay layer, just go ahead and blend it in a bit. A gentler kind of a reflection. Much better. So we are done with the lantern section, and I think that's looking great, very pretty. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be working on would be the snow. So let's get started with that. Okay, one more thing that we could just quickly do before we move on to the snow of the lantern is just for these two overlay layers for the candle reflections, I'm going to apply a slight Gaussian blur, because I feel like the reflections are way too crisp right now. I feel like if we apply a slight Gaussian blur to this, it's going to look a little nicer and more natural. So just a 2% Gaussian blur there, and 2% Gaussian blur to the other one as well. And that's it. I think that looks much more natural and softer. much better. Okay, so it's time to move on to the snow here. And we are going to locate our snow layer, which is right here, as you can see. So for this, let's create a clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. We're going to select the same blue color as the snow itself, and we've still got our soft airbrush selected. Now all we need to do at this point is just create some soft edges here for the snow, trying to see where it could possibly be creating some shadows at both ends. So it's usually around the curves that we would add these this blue color in, but very gently you can try building this in, just like this. Around the base, up here, so you get something of this sort. Alright, so once you're done with this, we're going to reduce the opacity of it down to about 70%. And then we're going to apply a light Gaussian blur, just about 3 or 4%. And that looks nice. Okay, now we're going to add some highlights before we go ahead and finish everything off with some more shadows. So it's highlights time right now. We're going to create a clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode to color dodge this time. And for the brush, we're going back to our organic rainforest brush. And for the color, we're going to use this pinkish purple color. We're just going to go ahead and get started by adding in some highlights up on here. Now you've got some areas that have been segmented by these shadows in the previous step, so we're going to try and maintain that and create a bit more of a fluffy kind of an appearance here. You can imagine that these highlights are basically at the highest point of the tuft of snow, okay, as you can imagine. So the brighter it is, the more light is getting hit on it. So you can just try and regulate that with this color and the brush strokes. So just lightly again in circular motions, you can go ahead and try and fill this in wherever you think there might be more light. Okay, so I think that's looking good. Next we're going to be painting in some orange highlights to this. So we're going to create another clipping mask, and we're going to change the blend mode to screen this time. And with the same rainforest brush, but the orange color this time, we're going to be painting in some more highlights, but they're going to be a little bit enhanced here at the edges, as you can see. Okay, and for the last one, we are going to just create another clipping mask, change the blend mode to add. We'll be adding in some shimmer to this snow by using the 2B compressed brush in charcoals. And for this, we're going to use this lilac color that we'd used for the glass. And again, we can just have a brush size of about 2 or 3%, whatever you need. It's just to add in a bit more of a shimmer. So at the points of your highlights, go ahead and add in some of this nice shimmery kind of a texture to your snow. That's looking nice. And to top it all, we're going to create last layer of shadows. So to do that, we are going to create a clipping mask above our multiply layer here, which was the base shadows. And then we're going to create, change the blend mode to multiply again for some more shadows. We're going to go back to the rainforest brush and then select the same snow blue color. And then this time just enhance your snow shadows a bit more in all of the areas where you might expect there to be shadows. Okay, so that's looking nice. I'm just gonna have a look and see if we can perhaps just change. Yeah, I think we can change the blend mode of the orange layer that we had from screen to add. And then I'm just going to reduce the opacity slightly down to 90% so that it looks nice and sparkly. Does it look better with screen maybe? Yeah, I think it looks nice with add. You can definitely have it a bit more sparkly at the top. Alright, so that's your snow at the top. And we can also do one more thing. Just reduce the opacity of our shadow layer that we just made down to around about 70%, depending on how dark your shadows looked like, because mine looked really dark, so I think it would look nicer with a lighter shadow. And also the shimmer, I think that's fine. Let's see, I think I'm going to reduce the opacity of the add layer down to about 70%. And the color dodge is looking nice as it is, so we can leave that. Yeah, that looks great. So we're done with the snow in that section and the whole lantern is completed. Okay, so let's move on to the log here now. So it's essentially almost the same kind of steps that we've got for the snow, but we'll start off with the log base in itself first. So I'm going to group our lantern snow layers together, rename that group as lantern snow, and then let's just move on to our log here. Now we're going to add a bit more texture to this log because it looks very plain right now. So create a clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to multiply. And for the texture, we're going to start off in charcoals with the willow charcoal brush. You can select the same color as the log base, which is this maroonish color. Then you're just going to gently paint in. Good. For some reason it's not painting. Because it's all normal. There we go, multiply. Right, so gently paint in a texture here for the log. Now create a new clipping mask. Change the blend mode to multiply again. Now we're going to use our soft airbrush. We've still got the same color selected. Now we're going to be painting in some shadows in the lower areas. So I'm going to increase my brush size to around 31% or so. And just around these lower areas, I'm going to add in some shadows. And around the snow as well, where you've got some snow, so you'd expect the snow to have some volume. So we're going to place in some shadows at the snow's base too. And then I'm going to just apply a general Gaussian blur to this to about a 10%, maybe if needed. Can just blend in some of these shadows a little bit more. They're getting a bit too dark. Okay, so that's looking great. So next thing we're going to do is just add in one more layer of texture to this. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply again. And for our last layer of textures, we're going to go back to our charcoals and select the burnt tree texture. And then very gently go ahead and apply this texture here. And there you go, we've got nice textured log. And I think that's decent enough for this. There's no need to go ahead and add too much detail, to be honest. All right, so we're going to group our log layers together, rename that as log, and then we're going to work on the snow. So it's, like I said, it's essentially the same steps as the lantern ones. So we're going to create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to multiply. We'll be adding in our general blue shadows first with the soft airbrush. So selected the snow blue color. So let's go ahead and paint in some shadows. Okay, and once that's painted in, we're going to apply some Gaussian blur. Wait, let's just reduce the opacity first, down to 70%. And then apply a Gaussian blur. Again, just about 5% or so. And then we're going to create another clipping mask. Change the blend mode to color dodge. Go back to the rainforest brush in organic. And then we're going to select the same purple pink color, add in some highlights. And you can concentrate more of them near the center where you've got the lantern, because you'd expect more areas to be highlighted around there. Okay, so once that's done, we're then going to go ahead and create a new clipping mask. Change the blend mode to screen. Let's try it with screen again. And then select the orange color. And then just in the center this time, we're going to go ahead and apply this highlight. Especially in the areas where you'd already applied the pink, purple pink highlights. Okay, so once that's done, we're then going to go ahead and create another clipping mask. change the blend mode to add again. And then in charcoals, select your 2B compressed brush, and with your lilac color, the same color as the glass, and then I'm going to head and just apply a light shimmer. To the snow. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then for the last bit, we're going to enhance the shadows. So create a new clipping mask above the multiply layer. Change the blend mode to multiply. And then we're going to go back to the rainforest brush. We still got our snow color selected. And let's just paint in some more shadows. So you can see like I've got more highlights on the side facing the lantern and shadows on the other side. Okay, so I think that's looking good. And then for the next step, we just want to add a little bit more orangish glow from the lantern itself. So we're going to do that now. Create a new clipping mask on top, and then we're going to keep the blend mode as normal for now. Select your soft airbrush, and with this orange color, just paint some orangish glow here on the lantern, off the lantern on the snow, just in these areas. Okay, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to 40%. Let's duplicate this layer now, and then I'm going to change the blend mode of the duplicated upper layer to add. Okay, and you're going to reduce the opacity down to 15% from 40%. And you can see now we've got a nice orangish glow here on the snow as well. And I think that looks pretty decent. Perhaps you can add a little bit more glow on this section. Just a bit here maybe. And that's it. Alright, so that's looking pretty nice. Now we want to go ahead and add a bit more shadows to the edges so that it looks more like it's an encircled kind of an illustration, you know. So like this is a bit more of a vignette kind of an effect without going into too much detail that way. So we're going to group our snow layers together, snow log layers, and then rename this group as log snow. And then we're going to group both of these together as well as just a log. And then we're going to duplicate this again. Okay, and we're going to hide our log group here. Now you can totally go ahead and just delete this log group if you want, or if you're short of layers eventually in your illustration. This is just a backup one in case you need to make any changes to the individual layers. At this point I don't feel like I need to, but if you want to keep it, you can. You've already duplicated this one, so that's fine. Okay, so we're going to merge all of these into one layer, so you've got the entire snow and the log on one layer now. Now I'm going to create some shadow clipping masks for these. I've got layer 100 here now. You can totally delete that entire log thing if you wanted, the log group, and keep this one layer if you're short on layers, okay? So this new clipping mask, the blend mode is multiply, and we're going to just slightly reduce the opacity down to about 70% for this. Still got the soft airbrush selected. Now we've got this plum color here right next to orange. We're going to use that. And all we really need to do at this point is just paint in some shadows here at the edge. Okay. So like I mentioned, we're trying to go for a bit more of a vignette effect, which means that the edges are going to be a bit darker so that the highlight is mainly on the lantern here. So we've got this, and then we can apply a Gaussian blur to this. I'd say about 30%. So it's looking a bit more natural in a way. Okay, I might even just add in a little bit here too at the base. And then we are going to add one last shadow one. So create a new clipping mask again, and then change the blend mode to multiply. And we're going to use the metal blue color, the one that we used for the lantern. And we're going to slightly paint in just some shadows right at the edge. And then apply a Gaussian blur again, 20%. And that looks good. So the log is ready here. But I also want to get an impression that this log is a bit blurred as well because it's in the background. And we want all the attention, all the crisp details to be here on this lantern rather than on the background. So we want that to be blurred as well. So I'm going to go ahead and group our log layers again. Rename this group as new log maybe. And then we're just going to repeat the same step of duplicating it and keeping it as a backup. You don't need to. You can totally just go ahead and work on this now if you want, as I am. Or if you want to keep them as a backup, go ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten this duplicated layer for the log. And I'm going to, well, as you can see, I've hidden both of these log layers. Remember to do that. Okay, so for this duplicated log layer, we're going to go to Gaussian blur. And then we're just going to apply a slight Gaussian blur here. As you can see, it's starting to blur at the edges. And that's exactly the kind of effect that we want. So I'd say you can go up to about 2% of a Gaussian blur. Yeah, and that looks nice. So it's softly blurred, and this looks like it's a prominent one in the foreground. Great. I'm just going to have a quick look and see. I'm not very happy with how it's looking too purplish here, the snow. So let me see if I can work with something here for, yeah. So particularly if you're having the same problem here, yeah. As you can see, it's the color dodge layer here, the purple one that we had. So I want to make it a bit less purple in a way. So I'm just going to change the blend mode to add, and then perhaps just reduce the opacity down to 85%. And while I'm at it, I'm going to reduce the opacity of this shadow layer as well, slightly down to 60%. The orange layer as well, slightly down to about 60% as well. So as you can see, the shimmer is a full 100, the orange layer is 60%. The purple layer that was supposed to be a color dodge has been changed to add and is now at 85%. The blue layer, that was the individual shadows that we made, that was multiply and it was 60%. And then we're still at 70% for the general shadows. Now you may not need to do all of these if you're pretty satisfied with how your snow looked. I think it's looking a little bit better now. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to work on would be the front snow section. So let's get started with that. Okay, so for this we are going to go back to our snow layer here. Now remember, we've got two layers of snow. We've got the front layer and also the one behind the candle, the entire lantern, which is right here. Okay, so we need to work on both of them simultaneously because it's part of the same snow, to be honest. So that's why. So let's create a new clipping mask to the snow here, and we are going to change the blend mode to multiply. They're not the same steps as the other two snow layers, so a little bit different, only because there's so much more light here that is going to be reflected onto the front snow as such. So we're changing both of these blend modes to multiply. Remember, we're going back to the front snow one, and then we can, for the first step, have the same thing that we're going to be pasting in some shadows here, just like we did for the other one. Then at this point you can just turn on your sketch layer and have a look where else do you really need to add in a bit more of these shadows. So just something like this maybe. And then remember, before we go back to the other one, let's go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur to this. Say about 15% or so. Yep. And I'm also going to apply a slight fluffiness with the rainforest brush as an added on texture. Just on these areas. You don't need to go beyond this for now. Okay, so let's repeat this step for the back snow as well. And I think we can just manage with the soft airbrush. And that's it. Okay, we don't really need to apply Gaussian blur because it's not really that visible anyway, so that's fine. Okay, next step we're going to create a new clipping mask and then keep the blend mode as normal. We've still got our soft airbrush selected, and we can, actually we don't need the soft airbrush, let's add some more texture to it. We're going back to the organic one, but this time instead of the rainforest brush, we can use the cotton brush here. So that's also a nice soft kind of a brush here. We will use the orange color here, and then just in the center, let's go ahead and apply a nice glow. So I'd say you can bring your brush size up to about 11 to 12% in this. Okay, we can also use this darker blue color here in the third row, and just add in a bit more of a shadow in some of these areas. Okay, and then let's just repeat this step for the back snow layer as well. New clipping mask, and we're just applying a soft orange glow right here to the snow behind there. We're going to reduce the opacity of this down to about 60%, and then do the same for the front row as well. So just down to 60% because we don't need it to be that dark at the moment. Okay, so you've got something of this sort, and then we can go ahead and apply some glow to this. So to do that, we're creating a clipping mask, and then we're changing the blend mode to add, and then we've still got the cotton brush selected. We can go ahead and add in some glow to this snow. And we can switch to the rainforest brush as well for a bit extra fluff. Right now I'm at a brush size of about 4%, so you can play around with that. Okay, and we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to about 80%. Let's repeat this step for the back snow layer too. New clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, reduce the opacity to 80%, and then just add in a little bit of this orange glow. Okay, great. And then we're just going to go ahead and add a little bit more glow to this by enhancing this glow a little bit more. And we'll start with the front snow section, create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and then with the same orange color and the rainforest brush, go ahead and just add in a little bit more for glow as a highlight to the snow. And then we can do the same for the back snow as well. Create a new clipping mask there and change the blend mode to add in a little bit more highlights there. Okay, so that's looking great. And then for our last step, we're just going to add in a bit more of a shimmer, just like we did for all of our other steps for the snows. And then create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, and we're going back to our 2B compressed brush, and with the lilac color, go ahead and add in some of this shimmer. In all of your highlighted parts. And even a little bit maybe on the shadow section. You can increase your brush size to about 10 to 15% if you want. Okay, I'm going to turn off my sketch layer now, just to have a look. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty nice. I'm going to go back to the back layer now and create a clipping mask there to add in the shimmer. So change the blend mode to add, and then lightly place in the shimmer there too. Okay, so we've got all of these present now. We're just going to add in a bit more of an edge shadow here, just like we've done for the log. So we're going to do the same thing here as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to the back section, sorry, front snow section, create a clipping mask there, and then change the blend mode to multiply. And we're going back to our soft airbrush now. And we can use this purple pink color in the first row. And just go ahead and apply, paint in this edge section here for the shadows. As you can see, it's giving us such a nice color variation. You can even place in some of these shadows here. Okay, and then you can gently just blend it up with a Gaussian blur perhaps. Just about a 5% Gaussian blur. And then I'm going to just blend in some of these. Okay, and we can do the same thing for the back section as well. Create a clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply. And one more thing though, I think it's a little bit too dark here, so we can reduce the opacity of this down to about 40%, and we'll build up with another layer of shadows. It's a bit too purplish and dark. So just for the back section again, we're going to do the same, reduce the opacity down to 40%. And then just paint in a gentle shadow at the edge. And for the final one, we are going to create a last clipping mask for the snow, and then change the blend mode this time to linear burn. Instead of using a dark color, we're going to use this almost white purplish color. Okay, and then we can go ahead and use the cotton brush here in organic, and then go ahead and apply some more shadows. So it's going to give us a nice bluish kind of a look, but purple wherever it meets the orange color. So you can use this to enhance your shadows while also giving it a bit more of a texture. So it's funny how a white color is giving you this effect, isn't it? But that's the beauty of blend modes, really. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty nice. And we probably do not really need to add in anything for the back. I think we're good. So let's just group our back snow layers together, rename the group as back snow, and then do the same for the front snow section, rename that as front snow. Alright, so our snow is done. I think that's looking very pretty. And now it's just time to work on these twig layers here. So create a new clipping mask for the twigs, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. And before we do anything else, actually, I think it might be better if our twigs are also a little bit darker in color. So let's just change the color entirely really quickly by just duplicating the main base twig layer, changing that into a clipping mask, and then we're going to just change the blend mode to multiply. Essentially the same step that we've done for our lantern as well earlier. Now we're just going to create some shadows and highlights for this, but I think we've already created enough of a shadow with adding in this multiply layer to this twigs as well right now. So right now let's just proceed by adding some highlights. So instead of having this new layer that we'd created, instead of the blend mode being multiply, we can just change it to add for our glow from the lantern itself. So we're going back to the soft airbrush and we'll select this orange color. So you can reduce your brush size now to about 7% or so. And oh, I'm painting on the wrong layer, sorry. Here we go, we're painting on the add layer now. So you can see it's suddenly started to glow, isn't it? Exactly what we want. So we're trying to just paint in some highlights on the facets facing the glow from the lantern. Remember, this is wood, so it's not going to be very reflective, but as these are just so close to the lantern, I think this kind of an effect is kind of gonna happen anyway. So go ahead and paint in these highlights. There you go. So I think that's looking very nice already. Okay, so we don't really need to add in any shadows like I mentioned, but I do feel that because we've got such nice tufts of snow here, we can add a very nice effect of these twigs melding into the snow, like they're poking out of the snow. Right now they've got very stiff edges, as you can see, so very crisp edges. We need to soften them up a bit, and the way to do that would be to group our twig layers together, and then we're just going to, again, if you want, you can go ahead and just, you know, make a, like, duplicate this entire thing if you want, or you can just merge it. We'll try it your way and we'll just keep it safe for now. We are going to I'm going to rename this as Twigs anyway, and we're going to duplicate the entire group. We renamed this as Twigs, and I've hidden the group. You can totally go ahead and delete it if you want, just like you did for the log one. It doesn't matter, but I've kept it for your sake right now. This group that we had duplicated, the Twigs one, I'm going to flatten that. Okay, so it's all in one layer, as you can see. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to use, in the eraser, I'm going to use the rainforest brush as an eraser tool. And then I'm going to just lightly go ahead and erase sections of this where I'm thinking that it's going to be immersed into the snow. So both edges probably are likely inside the snow here, so I'm just going to lightly vary my pressure and see, maybe it's got sections of the snow covering it, you know, just something like that. And do the same here. It's a very handy tip, not a trip. It's a very handy tip to be able to, you know, give the effect that this object is hidden inside the underlying snow. So So as you can see, my brush size is just about 1%, so that's giving me the best amount of control here. I think that's good. Okay, so that looks much better. These twigs are part of the snow now in a way, and yeah, so that's looking very nice. We are done with the foreground part of this illustration, and that's great. The next thing that we'll be working on will be the background. And before we move on to the background, a quick thing that we can also do is, because obviously you can imagine that this frame of the lantern is going to be opaque, so the light that is coming out from these glass panes is going to be a bit more divided, whereas a certain section of it will not receive light. The snow will not receive light. So to do that very quickly, we can go back to our front snow section, and this particular layer that is the main reflective one, we can have something to do with that. Okay, so we can select that. It's basically the one that is right above the normal layer. And then you can use the soft airbrush as your eraser tool, and then very gently, maybe have your brush size up to about 29% or so. Very gently, go ahead and just try and erase a little section of this glow corresponding to these frame layers here, frame lines in a way. Okay, so you have something like that, and then you can also do the same for the back snow as well, because you'll need a line going off there. So just there, I don't think it's much visible, to be honest, in that section. And then you can also do the same for the other add layer, the one on top. So just very gently try and erase that a bit. But there's no need to go ahead and erase it entirely, but I think this looks so much more natural that because of this frame, the light's going to be spread out. Okay, all right, so now it's time to work on the background here. So we've got our tree layers here, so we're going to work on the trees first. So you've got the first layer of trees, these two trees here. We're going to just create a little bit of texture for them. So create a new clipping mask and change the blend mode to multiply. And let's go ahead and just add a little bit of texture with the 4B compressed brush. I'm going to select the same color as the trees, and then we can just go ahead and gently apply a texture to these trees. Okay, and while we're at it, we might as well just go ahead and apply the same thing for all of them. They are the same steps, essentially. So multiply, add in textures, and for the last step too, multiply and add in some texture. All right, for our next step, we're going to add in some shadow to make it look a bit more 3D rather than a flat tree here. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then we're going to select the soft airbrush. And we've still got the same brown color selected, just around the edges. Just going to paint in a couple of lines at the edges, just like that. Okay, so once you've got something like this, We can then apply a Gaussian blur to this. Let's say about 5% Gaussian blur. And that looks great. So our trees look a little bit more cylindrical in a way, and that's what we really want from this. And once you're done with that, we can go ahead and repeat the same step for the others as well. So create a new clipping mask for the second layer of trees. Change the blend mode to multiply. And let's paint in some edge shadows. It doesn't really matter much, to be honest, because at the end it's all going to merge together quite a bit and you wouldn't be able to tell if we've added textures or not, but I think it's just nicer to have it anyway. So Gaussian blur 3% would work for this layer, and then for the last one we'll create another clipping mask, blend mode to multiply. Let's just paint in the edge shadow. And then apply Gaussian blur to these two. So another 3%, and that works. Okay, so you've got 3 distinctive tree groups here in varying depths, isn't it? So what we want to do here is as well, when we have these edge shadows for these 2 groups, for our last third group that we have just done, I think we can reduce the opacity of this down to about 70%. So it's really in the background, and we can go ahead and just merge all of these together. So we've got all of these now in one layer, all these textured trees, as you can see. Then for the second group that was here, we can reduce the opacity of our edge shadow layers down to about 85%. And then let's go ahead and merge these layers together as well. And do the same for our front ones as well. There's no need to reduce their opacity. And then once this is done, we're now going to go ahead and apply some Gaussian blur. Okay, so for this, let's start with the front row here. Okay, now we will basically just go apply, I'd say about a 4% Gaussian blur for this section of the trees. For the ones behind it, the second row, that can be about 5%, so they're even further. And the ones right in the background, they can be about a 6% Gaussian blur. All right, so that's looking pretty nice. As you can see, they're all they look like they're much further behind the lantern, definitely. I also want to fill in the background a bit more. So instead of having to color all of them in like that, you can add in some variations of being able to do this by just duplicating your furthermost layer of trees and then just moving the entire one by tapping on the transfer tool. And then you can just move it around a bit more. You can even select freeform and just elongate them as needed. And then you can do the same by duplicating them once more. And then this time maybe just tap on flip horizontal and you can move the entire layer around here maybe. Yeah, think about here between these 2 trees. That's fine. And then perhaps I'm going to just duplicate it another time and then flip it horizontally once more, and we can add something like that here perhaps. Or instead of like duplicating the entire thing, let's just delete that. We can do is just copy and paste this section maybe. And then I'm going to tap on horizontal, flip, and just have this here. In this layer, so you can see it's already here on a separate layer altogether. And then I'm going to duplicate it once more. And then move, maybe just tap horizontal. And then have it move a bit here perhaps. And I can move these a little bit here, wherever you want, to be honest. There's no fixed rule, it's just to be able to give you a bit more of a variety for your background. And make it look like there are more trees than just a couple of them there. And maybe I can have a little bit more variation. Just this one here. Something like that. And let's merge all of these together then. So you can see you've got an entirely new layer here. Okay, and if you feel like there's too much clutter in some of them, you can definitely go and erase them as well. So for example, I think I might erase this one. And you can always just blend in this tree using your smudge tool, just like that. Okay, and I think there's a little gap here that I would like to just put in one more tree. So I'm going to just copy and paste this one here. In this section. Okay, and I'm just going to blend this up here. Alright, so I've got quite a lot of trees here now, as you can see. That's looking pretty good. Make sure that they're all part of one layer. And once that's done, we're just going to go ahead and create one more layer of trees like this. So let's duplicate the entire layer here of the background, and we're going to just move this around a little bit so that it's right in the background. You can see it's filling up most of the gaps right there. Any of these that might need extension into the snow, go ahead and do that. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate this once more and move the entire thing a little bit here as well to fill in the gap. Okay, so you can see we've got this corner group here and this back one, so I'm combining them into two layers here. And this last layer that we've now made, this tree group, okay? So there's one group here which was the original one, and then there's this background group which is the new one. Okay, so the background one, the one that is right at the back, we are now going to just apply a little bit more Gaussian blur to them. So I'd say about 7% or so, maybe. Yeah, and then we can reduce their opacity down to about 80%. Okay, so you can see we've got lots of trees here and it's looking pretty good. I think I just want a little bit more, maybe one or two over here from the front section. I'm just being very picky. You don't have to be honest. But I think it'll just look nice. Oops, no. If we do. And remember, you can also rotate them into position if you feel like they're too... yeah, I think that's better. So rotate, merge them into one. These two trees, I'm going to just rotate them slightly here. Alright, so you've got these all in different layers now. As you can see, it's already looking like it's a very layered kind of an illustration. So amazing. Next thing that we're going to do is start working on adding some more light from the sun and the rays on the snow and everything, and then we'll be wrapping up the entire illustration. Okay, so we are going right above this sky layer that we have and creating a new clipping mask for that. And we'll change the blend mode to add. You've still got a soft airbrush selected. Let's select this yellow color and then choose a point in the sky where you would want the sun to be. So I think it would look nice right next to this ring here. So we could probably just have a circle like that, then just fill it in. Okay, I think I might just increase the size of this too. Yeah, it looks nice. And now we're just going to duplicate this, okay? And then we're going to, for the upper layer, apply a Gaussian blur to this. So I'd say have a blur of about 10%. And that looks nice. So it's already glowing. The next thing that we'd be doing would be to have the sun rays from there falling onto the different layers of the snow and casting shadows of these trees. Okay, so should we just go ahead and work on the shadows first for all of the snow layers, because that is really going to be helpful for us. So let's start off with this third layer, which is right in front, and we're going to create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to multiply. Let's select the same color of the snow, and then with the soft airbrush, go ahead and just paint in a shadow of the tree. Let's just make sure that their edges are in line with the tree itself and they're not too big or too small. And then we can also just switch on our sketch layer to see if we need to add in any bumps or something. It's not really, I haven't really created any. So we can just use our imagination. Maybe have a little bit of a snow bump here. You can imagine that these are probably just going to be little snow bumps like that. Okay, once you've got something like this in place, we can apply a Gaussian blur to this now. So let's say just about 7% or so. And then I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to about 60%. So that's looking pretty nice. So we're pretty good with that. We can combine these two together, merge them together, the shadow and the snow layer, and that looks great. Okay, because we've also done a blurring of the trees, or 4%. Let's do the same for this as well. So we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to the snow layer all together now. And that's going to be a 4%, just as the same as the trees on that layer. So let's repeat this step by adding in shadows of these trees in the second group on the second snow layer. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then select the purple color of the snow there. Reduce your brush size if needed, and then paint in the tree shadows. Okay, and then I'm just going to add in perhaps a bit more shadow up here at the edges. Something like that perhaps. Go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur now. Say somewhere around a 6%. That looks good. And we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer as well, down to about 70%. Alright, merge these two layers together, and we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to the entire second layer of snow. So Gaussian blur, and we had done a 5% Gaussian blur to the trees, so we're going to apply the same amount of Gaussian blur here as well. Alright, and for the last layer, new clipping mask, there are lots of trees in this section, so let's see what we can do. Select the color of the snow, and then just go ahead and apply, create some light shadows here, in whichever areas you can really. And remember, they don't all have to be parallel to each other. It really depends on the tree's positions as well. So it's completely fine if they're in slightly different directions. But yeah, okay. So once you've got those in place, go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur to this as well. I'd say about a 6%. And we can reduce the opacity of this to about 80%. Okay, so we've got all of our shadows in place, and that's looking great. Let's merge these two together, and we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to the entire back snow layer, about a 6%, because that was what we had done for the trees. Alright, so we are done with adding all of our shadows there. The only thing that's left is to add in our highlights, so let's go ahead and start right from the back then. We're creating a new clipping mask. Actually, no, don't need a clipping mask, just a new layer right above this furthermost snow layer. And we will change the blend mode to add. And then with the orange color, we're going to start painting in some rays from the sun firstly. Okay? And by that I mean, you're going to paint in some rays like this. Okay, so once you've got something of this sort, let's just use the soft airbrush as a smudge tool and go ahead and blend it out a bit. So I've got a smudge tool of about size, I think 30% would be ideal for this. And you can drag out some of the color here and then spread it out a bit more. And do the same here as well for the rest of. So you can imagine that these rays are basically just coming from wherever there is gap between the trees. So let's try and maintain that. Maybe erase some of this a little bit from where the trees are present. And bring it in. Maybe this one we can reduce in reach. And increase this. So it's already looking so much more magical and a lot more realistic now, isn't it? Okay, so you've got that. I think I also want to add a little bit more yellow to this area. It's looking a bit too dull. Well, orange, not yellow. So between these trees you can go ahead and add some more orange. That's looking pretty nice. Okay, and while we're at it, let's go ahead and just paint in a little bit more of a highlight for our snow layer here. Because obviously you can imagine that there's going to be some light falling on the snow too, so we need to highlight that as well. So that's an effect that we can achieve. Okay, looks great. Next we're going to do the same thing for the second layer of snow here. Create a new layer above it, change the blend mode to add, and then we're going to go ahead and paint in some more highlights to this section of the snow. And you can even give the impression that there is some light falling otherwise as well, like some dappling of the snow through the trees. On this layer. Okay, and we're reducing the opacity of this layer to 80%. And then for our last step, we're going to create another layer above the third layer of snow, change the blend mode to add, and then let's just blend it all in as well for this layer. Okay, and reduce the opacity down to about, let's say 60%. Yeah, 65% for this. Okay, so once this is done, actually, I'll increase it a bit more. Let's say 70% is good enough. Yeah. So one thing that we've got to do now is to just add in some shimmer, just like we did for the rest of the snow. So create one more layer above this, change the blend mode to add again, and we can go back to our 2B compressed brush in charcoals, use the same lilac color, and go ahead and just paint in some light snow texture. I'm reducing my brush size to about 5%. So you can carefully add it wherever you've got these soft highlights. Okay, so that's done. That's looking pretty nice. And we're almost done with the illustration. We're just going to add a little bit more of the finishing touches, some bokeh lights around the back of the lantern. So when you can imagine that when you take a photograph of the sun directly like this, when it's dappling through trees, you get some nice circlish kind of lights there, which are caused usually by the lens, whatever you're watching. So we're kind of like trying to imitate that effect here too. So to do that, we are going to see where our back lantern is, right here. We'll create a new layer above that. Below the back lantern, so above the back snow layer. And then change the blend mode to add, and go to luminance and select the bokeh lights brush. And use this orange color. I've got a brush size of about 22%, and all you need to do is just add in some of these soft lights. As you can see, these are the little circles that we're just trying to achieve. Just something like that. Don't go overboard at this step, honestly. The less is more at this point. So if you feel like you need to redo this to get the effect a couple of times, do that. But just a little bit around the sun. And I think that should be enough. Yeah, so that's it for this step. And then to just go ahead and add a little bit more glow around this lantern though, because the whole purpose is for this lantern to glow very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and do that too. For that, let's say we're going to go right to the top, right below the sketch layer, create a new layer over there, and change the blend mode to add for this layer. Select your soft air brush, increase your brush size to maximum, and with the orange color again, just around the top section of your lantern, paint a bit more glow. Okay, once that's done, you can reduce the opacity of this down to about 30%, because we don't want it to glow just too much. And then you can apply a Gaussian blur just to even it all out a bit. It's about 7 to 8%. You can see that having this glow has already made such a huge difference in this. So you can see how much ever you want to increase it to. I think even 35% would be a nice glow kind of an effect for our lantern here. And if you're feeling that your the candle flame here is a bit too subdued, you can go ahead and just duplicate it once more if you want. Or you can even change the brightness of any of them. I think that's looking much better for me. Okay, and the last step for this entire illustration, I promise it's the last step, it's just to add in some nice little fireflies to the candle, to the entire lantern, because I think that's what makes it all so much more fantastical and magical. So we're creating a new layer right on top of this orangish glow that we've created, and then we're going to change the blend mode of this one to add, go to luminance and select the light pen brush, and then just paint in some fireflies right around the lantern itself with the orange color. Okay, so once you've created these, we can go ahead and just duplicate this layer and then apply a Gaussian blur to this top one. Let's say about, I'd say a 7% Gaussian blur to the top layer. Then I'm going to reduce the opacity of the lower layer down to about 50% to just give it a nice subtle kind of a glow here. And I think we are done with this illustration. Look at that. I think it's a beautiful one. We've really played with lighting and shadows in this entire illustration. Well done, guys. Thank you so much for staying with me and continuing and completing this illustration. You've done a splendid job, I'm sure about it. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me in this one. So please do let me know in the comments as well whether you would like more illustrations like these with more backgrounds, or are you just happy with simpler objects as well, like we've been doing props so far. I'm happy to do both in some ways. Obviously, the more complicated these backgrounds get, the more time they're going to take to create and might not be feasible for YouTube as such. But do let me know. I'm more than happy to create some courses around those things too. All right, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. So guys, if you'd like to share your creation with me online, remember to tag me in your post on Instagram. I absolutely love seeing your versions of the tutorials and sharing them on my page. And make sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this tutorial too. And don't forget to check out my other videos. I've got so many more magical projects waiting for you. New tutorials come out every 2 weeks on my channel, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.